Hello everyone. I know I made you wait. I'm sorry. The way you responded to my coming soon poster that I had shared a few days back was really inspiring. Thank you so much. Although the routine to create something cannot be fixed, but to read a good bedtime story every day can always be disciplined. I'm sorry that I'm still failing to make it in my routine. Anyways, without further delay, let's begin. But before I begin, let me share how I felt reading The Postmaster in the previous episode. I know no one can disagree that Tagore's writings have always been so relevant. Regardless of the difference in the times, the human emotions that he delves into, and the problems that he deals with in his writings have always been universal and beyond the shackles of time and place. I don't know how such a short story could vividly create such a deep connection of the reader with both the characters of the story. Special mention, just 2 characters in the story. Towards the end, when the postmaster was leaving Ratan forever, the misery and the fate of that orphaned girl was squeezing my heart. And I think you could sense that in my voice. I don't know how many of the things even today we do that is just against our conscience, but we still do, only for the sake of being accepted in the society. This story was a reminder of the same. Let me move on to the new story now, The Child's Return. I don't know anything about the story. Literally nothing. Do you? It's good. If you know, it's good. If not, then also it's good. We'll discover it together. But I can't wait today to search on it and then read. I want to hit on it directly. Let's start. Raicharan was 12 years old when he came as a servant to his master's house. He belonged to the same caste as his master and was given his master's little son to nurse. As time went on, the boy left Raicharan's arms to go to school. From school he went to college, and after college he entered the judicial service. Until the time of the boy's marriage, Raicharan was his sole attendant. But when a mistress came into the house, Raicharan found that he had 2 masters instead of 1. All his former influence passed to the new mistress. This was compensated for by a fresh arrival. Anukul had a son born to him, and Raicharan, by his unsparing attentions, soon obtained complete hold over the child. He would toss him up in his arms, call to him in absurd baby language, put his face close to the baby's, and withdraw it again with a laugh. Presently, the child was able to crawl and venture outside the house. When Raicharan went to catch him, he would scream with mischievous laughter and try to evade him. Raicharan was amazed at the profound skill and exact judgment the baby showed when pursued. He would say to his mistress with a look of awe and mystery, Your son will be a judge someday." Now, new wonders came in their turn. It was to Raicharan an epoch in human history when the baby began to toddle. When he called his father Ba Ba and his mother Ma Ma and Raicharan Channa, then Raicharan's joy was boundless. He wanted to let the whole world know. After a while, Raicharan was asked to show his ingenuity in other ways. He had, for instance, to play the part of a horse, holding the reins between his teeth and prancing with his feet. He had also to wrestle with his little charge, and if he could not, by a wrestler's trick, fall onto his back defeated at the end, and a great outcry was certain. About this time, Anukul was transferred to a district on the banks of the Padma. On his way through Calcutta, he bought his son a little go-kart, and at the same time a yellow satin waistcoat, a gold-laced cap, and gold bracelets and anklets. Raicharan loved to take this finery out and put it on his little charge whenever they went for a walk, and this he did with great pride and ceremony. Then came the rainy season, and day after day the rain poured down. The hungry river, like an enormous serpent, swallowed terraces, villages, and cornfields, covering with its flood the tall grasses and wild casuarinas on the sandbanks. From time to time there was a deep thud as the river banks crumbled. The unceasing roar of the main current could be heard from far away. Masses of foam carried swiftly past proved to the eye the swiftness of the stream. One afternoon the rain stopped. It was cloudy but cool and bright. Raicharan's little despot did not want to stay indoors on such a fine afternoon. His lordship climbed into the go-kart. Raicharan between the shafts dragged him slowly along till he reached the rice fields on the banks of the river. There was no one in the fields and no boat on the stream. Across the water on the farther side, the clouds were rifted in the west. The silent ceremonial of the setting sun was revealed in all its glowing splendor. In the midst of that stillness, the child suddenly pointed in front of him and cried, "Channa, pitiful!" On a mud flat close by stood a large kadamba tree in full flower. My lord, the baby looked at it with greedy eyes, and Raicharan knew immediately what he wanted. Only a short time before he had made, out of the flower balls of this tree, a small go-kart, and the child had been so happy dragging it about by a string that for the whole day Raicharan was not asked to put on the reins at all. He was promoted from being a horse to being a groom. But Raicharan had no wish that evening to go splashing knee-deep through the mud to reach the flowers, so he quickly pointed in the opposite direction and cried, "Look, baby, look at the bird." And with all sorts of curious noises he pushed the go-kart rapidly away from the tree. But a child, destined to be a judge, cannot be put off so easily. And besides, there was at the time nothing to attract his eyes, and you cannot keep up forever the pretense of an imaginary bird. The little master's mind was made up, and Raicharan was at his wits' end. "Very well, baby," he said at last. "You sit still in the cart, and I will go and get you the pretty flower. Only mind you, don't go near the water." As he said this, he bared his legs to the knee and waded through the oozing mud towards the tree. The moment Raicharan had gone, his little master's thoughts raced off to the forbidden water. The baby saw the river rushing by, splashing and gargling as it went. It seemed as though the disobedient wavelets themselves were running away from some greater Raicharan with the laughter of 1,000 children. At the sight of their mischievous sport, the heart of the human child grew excited and restless. He got down stealthily from the go-kart and toddled off towards the river. On his way, he picked up a small stick and leant over the bank of the stream, pretending to fish. The mischievous fairies of the river, with their mysterious voices, seemed to be inviting him to enter their playhouse. Raicharan had plucked a handful of flowers from the tree and was carrying them back in a fold of his cloth, his face wreathed in smiles, but when he reached the courtyard, it was empty. He looked round on all sides, but there was no one there. He looked back at the cart, and there was no one there. In that first terrible moment, his blood froze within him. Before his eyes, the whole universe swam round like a dark mist. From the depths of his broken heart, he gave one piercing cry. "Master, master, little master!" But no voice answered. Channa. No child laughed mischievously back. No scream of baby delight welcomed his return. Only the river ran on with its splashing, gargling noise as before, as though it knew nothing at all and had no time to attend to such a tiny human event as the death of a child. As the evening crept on, Raicharan's mistress became more and more anxious. She sent men out everywhere to search. They went with lanterns in their hands and reached at last the banks of the Padma. There they found Raicharan rushing up and down the fields like a stormy wind, shouting in a voice of despair, "Master, master, little master." When they got Raicharan home at last, he fell prostrate at the feet of his mistress. They shook him and questioned him and asked him repeatedly where he had left the child, but all he could say was that he knew nothing. Though everyone held the opinion that the Padma had swallowed the child, there was still a lurking doubt left. For a band of gypsies had been noticed outside the village that afternoon, and some suspicion rested on them. The mother went so far in her wild grief as to think it possible that Raicharan himself had stolen the child. She called him aside with piteous entreaty and said, "Raicharan, give me back my baby, give me back my child. Take from me any money you want, but give me back my child." Raicharan only beat his forehead in reply. His mistress in her anger ordered him out of the house. Anukul tried to reason his wife out of this wholly unjust suspicion. Why on earth, he said, should he commit such a crime as that? The mother only replied, the baby was wearing gold ornaments. Who knows? It was impossible to reason with her after that. Raicharan went back to the village of his birth. He had no son, and there was no hope that a child would now be born to him. But it came about before the end of a year that his wife gave birth to a son and died. An overwhelming resentment at first grew up in Raicharan's heart at the sight of this new baby. At the back of his mind was an indignant suspicion that it had come as an usurper in place of the little master. He also thought that it would be a grave offense to be happy with a son of his own after what had happened to his master's little child. Indeed, if it had not been for a widowed sister who mothered the new baby, it would not have lived long. But gradually a change came over Raicharan's mind. A wonderful thing happened. This new baby in turn began to crawl about and venture outside the house bent on mischief. It also showed an amusing cleverness in making its escape to safety. Its voice, its laughter and tears, its gestures were those of the little master. Sometimes, when Raicharan listened to its crying, his heart suddenly began thumping wildly against his ribs, and it seemed to him that his former little master was crying somewhere in the unknown land of death because he had lost his Chinna. Phalna, for that was the name Raicharan's sister gave to the new baby, soon began to talk. It learned to say Baba and Mama with a baby accent. When Rajaran heard those familiar sounds, the mystery suddenly became clear. The little master could not cast off the spell of his channa, and therefore he had been reborn in his house. The three arguments in favor of this were, to Rajaran, altogether beyond dispute. The new baby was born soon after his little master's death. His wife could never have accumulated such merit as to give birth to a son in middle age. The new baby walked with toddling steps and called out Baba and Mama. There was no sign lacking. This was certainly the future judge. Then suddenly Rajan remembered the terrible accusation of the mother. He said to himself in amazement, the mother's heart was right. She knew I had stolen her child. When once he had come to this conclusion, he was filled with remorse for his past neglect. He now gave himself over, body and soul, to the new baby and became its devoted attendant. He began to bring it up as if it were the son of a rich man. He bought a go-cart, a yellow satin waistcoat, and a gold embroidered cap. He melted down the ornaments of his dead wife and made gold bangles and anklets. He refused to let the little one play with any child in the neighborhood and became himself its sole companion day and night. As the baby grew to boyhood, he was so petted and spoiled and clad in such finery that the village children would call him Your Lordship and jeer at him. And older people regarded Rajaran as unaccountably crazy about the child. At last the time came for the boy to go to school. Rajaran sold his small piece of land and went to Calcutta. There, with great difficulty, he found employment as a servant and sent Felna to school. He spared no pains to give him the best education, the best clothes, the best food. Meanwhile, he himself lived in a mere handful of rice and would say in secret, my little master, my dear little master, you loved me so much that you came back to my house. You will never suffer from any neglect of mine." In this way, 12 years passed away. The boy could now read and write well. He was bright, good-looking, and in perfect health. He paid a great deal of attention to his personal appearance and took great care in the parting of his hair. He was inclined to extravagance and spent money freely in finery and enjoyment. He could never quite regard Rajaran as a father because though he had the affection of a father, his manner was that of a servant. A further fault was this, that Rajaran kept secret from everyone the fact that he himself was the father of the child. The students of the hostel in which Felna was a boarder were greatly amused by Rajaran's country manners, and I am afraid that behind his father's back, Felna joined in their fun. But in the bottom of their hearts, all the students loved the innocent and tender-hearted old man. And Felna also was very fond of him. But as I have said before, he loved him with a kind condescension. As Rajaran grew older and older, his employer was continually finding fault with him for his incompetence. He starved himself for the boy's sake, so that he grew weaker in body and was no longer up to his daily task. He began to forget things and became dull and stupid. But his employer expected the work of a fully capable servant and would listen to no excuse. The money that Rajaran had brought with him from the sale of his land was now exhausted, and the boy continually grumbled about the state of his clothes and continually asked for more money. At last, Rajaran made up his mind. He threw up his work as a servant and left some money with Felna. Before leaving, he promised Felna that after seeing to some necessary business in his native village, he would immediately return. He went off at once to Barashat, where Anukul was magistrate. Anukul's wife was still broken down with grief, for she had no other child. One evening, Anukul was resting after a long and weary day in court. His wife was buying from a mendicant quack at an exorbitant price a herb which, so the quack assured her, would ensure the birth of a child. Suddenly in the courtyard, Anukul heard a voice raised in greeting, and he went out to see who was there. There before him stood Raicharan, and when he saw his old servant, Anukul's heart was softened. He asked him many questions and offered to take him back into his employ. But Raicharan only smiled faintly and said in reply, "I merely want to make obeisance to my mistress." Anukul accompanied Raicharan into the house, but the mistress did not receive him as warmly as his old master had done. Raicharan took no notice, but with his hand clasped in apple said, "It was not the Padma that stole your baby. It was I." "Great God!" Anukul exclaimed. "What? Where is he?" Raicharan replied, "He is with me. I will bring him the day after tomorrow." It was Sunday, and so the magistrate's court was not sitting. From early morning, both husband and wife were gazing expectantly along the road, waiting for Raicharan's appearance. At 10 o'clock, he came, leading Felna by the hand. Anukul's wife, without questioning his identity, took the boy on her lap and was wild with excitement, laughing, weeping, touching him, kissing his hair and his forehead, and gazing into his face with hungry, eager eyes. The boy was very good looking and was dressed like a gentleman's son. The heart of Anukul brimmed over with a sudden gush of affection. Nevertheless, the magistrate in him asked, "Have you any proofs that he is my son?" Raicharan said, "Proof? How could there be any proof of such a deed? God alone knows that I and no one else in the world stole your boy." When Anukul saw how eagerly his wife clung to the boy, he realized how futile it was to ask for proofs. It would be wiser to believe. And then, where could an old man like Raicharan get such a boy? And why should his faithful servant deceive him? He could surely hope for no gain from such deceit. Still, he could not forget his old servant's lapse from duty, so he exclaimed, "Raicharan, you must not remain any longer here." "Where shall I go, master?" said Ramcharan in a voice choking with grief. Then with hands clasped imploringly he added, "I am old. Who will take an old man as a servant?" The mistress said, "Let him stay. My child will be pleased and I forgive him." But Anukul's magisterial conscience would not let him permit this. "No," he said, "he cannot be forgiven for what he has done." Raicharan bowed to the ground and clasped Anukul's feet. "Master," he cried, "let me stay. It was not I that did it. It was God." Anukul's conscience was more shocked than ever when Raicharan tried to put the blame on God. "No," he said, "I cannot allow it. I can trust you no longer. You have acted trickerously. Raicharan rose to his feet and said, It was not I that did it." "Who was it then?" asked Anukul. Raicharan replied, "It was my fate." But no educated man could take this for an excuse, and Anukul remained obdurate. When Felna saw that he was the wealthy magistrate's son and not Raicharan's, he was at first angry. for the thought that he had been cheated all this time of his birthright. But seeing Raicharan in distress, he generously said to his father, "Father, forgive him. Even if you don't let him live with us, let him at least have a small monthly pension." On hearing this, Raicharan was speechless. He looked for the last time on the face of his son. He made obeisance to his old master and mistress. Then he went out and mingled with the numberless people of the world. At the end of the month, Anukul sent some money to his village, but the money came back, for no person of the name of Raicharan could be found there. Oh my God.